Now, welcome everybody to October's technical training meeting. I hope you can see the agenda on your screen. Let me just run through the agenda real quickly, and then we'll kind of get into things. I've listed just a couple of training opportunities. One thing of note that they did extend the BPI pilot for 2 more weeks, so it goes until October 14th right now. I think we've taken care of everybody in the program, but if that extension helps you in any way, then please contact Wade or Dalton. I guess, is Wade still out shooting Bambi too?
Yep.
Yeah, well, reach out to Dalton or I today if you need any help on that. I don't know if we'll have time to help you or not, but we can at least talk. And then, oh, this was just something, this is coming next year. I probably ought to erase it for now, but we will be doing some training on the NEAT for people who are QCIs that are going to have to get their auditor certification. We'll do some training in the spring. Is anybody else
on that pilot exam?
Yep.
I did get an update the other day. DOE's got enough participants. They've been able to develop cut scores for both tests. And from what I've been told, there's only about 6 or 8 questions that they're even going to modify. Most of the questions haven't been very contested, but there's about 6 or 8 of them that they're going to fix.
Cool, but so with that, I heard that they had extended it because they didn't quite have enough data, but you're saying that they now do, so that we shouldn't expect, there won't be any other extensions. It will be ending on the 14th.
Yeah. They had enough to make the cut scores. That's what they were looking to extend. They wanted, I can't remember which test it was now, they were wanting a few more participants on one of the exams.
Okay.
But, yeah.
All right. Anybody aware of any other training opportunities that are coming up that this group should know about? I saw some code stuff from Nexent and a few things like that. If anybody's needing some contractor CEUs, let me know. I could point you in that direction, but otherwise, that's all I'm aware of. As far as just the new business, I'll go through our production in just a second, just show you guys where we're at. Just a reminder to everybody, as of July 1, you were supposed to be having every one of your clients sign the Radon Informed Consent form, and you're supposed to be giving them a copy of the EPA's Radon Guide. So make sure that you're doing that. I did put those resources on the IWTC website. So if you need those, they are just on the resources tab, and I think if you just, I think I put them under somewhere. If you just search for the word radon when you get here, you'll find them, if my internet would work. Anyway, they are on the, there it is. So attachment 20, Radon Informed Consent Form and the Citizen's Guide to Radon. So it's up to each of your agencies to print that in whatever format you need to give that to your clients. And you do not have to use this exact Informed Consent Form. You're welcome to integrate it into your forms, but if you want to, I put it together in a form that you can use that will work and allows the clients to sign. So make sure that you guys are doing that on all of your new clients. I will be checking that on monitoring when I come around. So any questions or concerns on that? All right. I got a notice there was another update to the DG1000. So if you guys have a DG1000, it looked like there may be 1 or 2 little features that might be nice. So run the update when you get a minute. And then our next meeting will be on the first Tuesday in November, which will be the 6th. So that's all of our new business. I'll go through production in a second, and then Dalton's going to take us through some field guide training on health and safety, worker health and safety stuff. And then Brad's going to talk to us about braiding, or some DOE funding, braiding questions, and we're going to talk about the new boxes on the BWR. So that's basically what we're going to go through for the meeting today. Does anybody have anything else that's pressing that they wanted to ask about before we get into the meat of things? All right. For production, this is our weatherization unit production information as of the end of September. And I'm a little concerned. Just as a reminder, the light green shows the goals. So each agency set a goal for the number of units that they would produce each month. And so that's reflected there in light green, and then the dark green is the actual units. And we just, you know, so in July, we were supposed to do 34, we only did 28. August, we were supposed to do 42, we only got 34. September, we were supposed to do 42, we only got 26. I hope that we have a bunch of production that's completed and we just need to report on it. But anyway, we're nowhere near what we're projected for. And then, you know, just looking at, this is the monthly goal, and then this is kind of what happens during the year. And if we continue on where we're projected, we're going to fall way short of where we need to be for the year. So please be aware that we are not meeting our goals. There was one agency that did meet their monthly goal this month, so I got to give props to Bear River Association of Government. Thank you guys for turning in the number of units that you had committed to. But everybody else, please do all that you can to get there. And then along with that, this next screen shows basically just to kind of keep in mind that we know that there's crisis stuff going on as well, and we know that there are crisis completions going on. This screen shows, the light blue shows the average number of crisis jobs that we have done over the last 4 years during each month. And then the dark blue shows the actual number of crisis jobs we did. And we are turning in, like in July, we turned in 2 more crisis jobs than the average. August, 4 more. And last month we had 5 more. But the extra units may not necessarily, well, they are not, it's not that we're actually serving more clients, it's that we're breaking them apart and turning in cooling crisis and heating crisis and water heater crisis. And so the stuff on the right-hand side in purple, this is actually the total, this is an unduplicated count. This shows the total numbers of clients served over the last 4 years. And then the dark purple shows the total number of clients served in the last 3 months. So if we went to the house and we served them with weatherization, and we also turned in a BWR for some crisis stuff, this kind of levels that out and shows that in July we served a few more clients than we normally do, but in the last 2 months we haven't. On average last month we've been serving 32 different clients, and we only served 29. So factor that kind of stuff in as you're thinking about where you're at with your production, and make sure that you're serving the right number of clients, that you've got the right amount of production going on so that we can actually reach our goals. Anyway, that's all I've got on production. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? All right. Dalton, you're up, man. You want me to turn the screen over to you?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Okay. See if I can find you here. Oh, there you are. Oh, you know what? Brad, can you do it? Because it says you're listed as the organizer, and I'm trying to switch to Dalton, but it's not working.
Cool.
Maybe it'll work on your end.
There you go, Mr. Dalton.
It did.
All right. All right, can everybody see the field guide?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to go over section 1.9 in our field guide, worker health and safety. This is really important for all all of you agencies to be aware of and to be refreshing on quite often, quite frequently, be visiting. I'll read this first section and then we'll kind of hit some highlights. Spend about 10 minutes going through all the way down to section 1.9.12. So this first part just talks about kind of a general scope on worker health and safety. It says the personal health and safety of each worker is vitally important to every weatherization agencies. Injuries are the fourth leading cause of death in the United States. Long-term exposure to toxic materials contributes to workers' sickness, absenteeism, and death. Both injury and hazardous and toxic substances exist during weatherization work. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, establishes work safety standards. Weatherization staff and contractors must attend training on OSHA standards and observe these standards on the job. Safety always has priority over other factors affecting weatherization operations. Some hazards deserve attention because of their statistical danger. Become aware of these most common workplace hazards. And in our guidance, everybody that's working out in the field either needs to have an OSHA 30 or OSHA 10 card, all your workers. But these are kind of the main, statistically the main things that people get injured in the workplace are vehicle accidents, falls, back injuries, exposure to hazardous materials, electrical hazards, and repetitive stress injuries. Section 1.9.1 talks about commitment to safety. Safety requires commitment, awareness, communication, and action. Workers may not remember safe work practices unless employers periodically review safe practices. In our guidelines, section E7 23B, your agencies should be holding quarterly safety trainings. And they should cover one of the focus 4 hazards of OSHA's. They are fall protection, caught in or between, struck by, or electrocution. You should implement those into your quarterly safety trainings as one of the topics. But each agency needs to make sure they're committed to this safety policy and that they follow their safety policy in holding these meetings, and they should be doing quarterly on-site safety inspections as well, and that's also listed in section E7 23B of our state guidelines. I'm not going to read all the bulletin points on commitment to safety, but just be aware of that. And then section 1.9.2 covers new workers. It says new workers are several times more likely to injure themselves on the job compared to experienced workers. Before the first day on the job, new workers should learn about safety basics such as proper lifting, safe ladder usage, and safe operation of power tools. New employees should be required to use these common safety equipment is proper clothing, gloves, respirators, safety glasses, hearing protectors. Just with new employees, just be aware that they are at a higher risk. So make sure you're taking your time to let them know of the hazards that are around that they may not be aware of since they are new to weatherization. Driving is a big problem with job site accidents. It says according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 1/3 of all occupational fatalities in the United States occur in motor vehicle accidents. So they lay out a few safety things in here. You should inspect vehicles regularly and repair them if necessary. Verify that these safety features are present and functioning. They should check the brake system, steering system, horn, headlights, rear view and side mirrors, signals, backup lights, fire extinguisher. The next section in worker health and safety is lifting and back injuries. To protect yourself from back injuries, do these things, and it says to get help before trying to lift heavy or awkward loads. That's how people get hurt a lot. Try to stay in good physical condition. Control your weight through diet and exercise. And then preventing back injury. So these policies help prevent back injuries on the job. Redesign work activities. Adapt equipment to minimize awkward movements. Perform strength testing of workers. Set lifting limits and provide training for all workers on causes and prevention of back injuries. Encourage breaks to prevent workers from being in straining positions for long periods of time, and then share the most difficult work among all capable crew members. Section 1.9.5, respirator health. You should be doing a respirator fit test out on the job when you're getting ready to go into a crawl space or an attic. You as an employee should do your own little fit test where you cover the exhalation ports and kind of see if you got a good seal on your face. And then also OSHA requires a completed form documenting employees' fit testing each year. So the agency should be performing a fit test on their employees. That's recorded. That's really important that you guys do that. And then if you have beards, facial scars, if the regular respirator don't fit you well, you should use a full face respirator to achieve a good seal. So another way we get injured employees get injured on the job is hazardous materials. And so you want to inspect the work site to identify hazardous materials and plan on how to avoid the hazard. Learn how to handle hazardous materials used on the job, and then use your PPE that is recommended in the SDS, which is the safety data sheets from OSHA on whatever materials you're using. Make sure you're reading those, making those available to your workers so they have the SDS sheets to keep them informed on what the hazards are on the different products that they're using. Equipment for personal and crew safety. It says employers are responsible to provide their employees with appropriate personal protective equipment or PPE, and employees are responsible to use the provided PPE. So it's kind of a two-way road there. The employer should be providing it, but the employee is responsible to actually be using it. And I won't go through each item, but section 1.9.8 talks about falls. Falls off ladders and stairs cause 13% of all workplace injuries, according to the National Safety Council. Other falls from the heights account for approximately 7% of workplace injuries. Some of the highlighted things with ladders are avoid metal ladders, maintain all ladders in good repair, extend the ladders at least 3 feet above where you're accessing. The ladders should not have more than 4 feet of rise for every foot the ladders are away from the building. You should block and tie the ladders in place at the top and bottom. Don't overreach on ladders. Avoid carrying loads up the ladders or operating power tools on the ladders. Section 1.9.9 highlights tool safety. Make sure your guys are using the right tools for the job, keeping their tools in good condition, inspecting the tools for damage, and that they're operating to the manufacturer's specifications, and that they are wearing the proper PPE for the tools that they're operating. and that they use double insulated power tools or a GFCI when operating them. Section 1.9.10 talks about repetitive stress injuries, and a couple of the bulletins to help with this is use a comfortable arm and hand posture when operating tools for a long period of time. Change the angle and location of your work surface frequently. Mix your difficult tasks with easier ones. Carry smaller loads. Take short rest breaks periodically and stretch any tight muscles. Just promote good with your employees or your coworkers. Just promote good work habits that you can help keep them from getting injured. Safety for crawl spaces and other confined areas. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration defines a confined space as a space that contains a hazard, like confinement, limited access, or restricted airflow because of its small size. Employers must be aware of the hazards of confined spaces and have a policy for protecting workers. And all of your agencies should have a policy. Make sure that you cover that with your employees on a regular basis so that they understand and are implementing your confined space policy. And also in section E7 of our guidelines, E7 23A 5, it talks about confined space, so, and what the agency's requirements are there. Section 1.9.12 talks about extreme weather. Just be aware, when you're sending workers into the hot attic or something, make sure they're drinking plenty of water. Take salt tablets, ventilate attics with fans, rotate workers in attics to prevent heat exhaustion. Use water or ice to cool your skin if you experience heat stress, and rest when you feel fatigued. With cold weather, you want to dress in layers for comfort and changing temperatures. Wear insulated boots or heavy socks. Wear insulated gloves. Seek warm shelter if you experience numbness or uncomfortable chilling. And then in windy weather, you just want to anchor ladders. You want to make sure they're not carrying sheet goods that are going to act like a sail. And then make sure don't have a bunch of materials and tools laid around that can blow around and injure somebody. So that's a pretty quick overview of worker safety. Again, for you coordinators that are on and just QCIs and auditors, you want to make sure you're taking worker safety seriously and doing regular safety trainings and addressing hazards as you're finding them, especially you auditors as you're out there on the jobs first. You can kind of set the mood of that job by identifying some of the hazards out there prior to any workers and stuff. So that's what I had, Matt, for him.
Perfect. Thank you. Does anybody have questions for Dalton before we move on to the next thing? All right. Next on the agenda, Brad's going to talk about some concerns about braiding DOE funds, and then we'll talk about the new fields on the BWR. We can see your BWR guide, Brad. But we can't hear you.
No.
Great.
There you go.
I didn't want to talk anyway. All right, we'll try again. So after taking 3 months to get some simple changes in, they came and got the last update done to fix that ACH 50 field so it takes decimals. So we got the BWR completion guide I've got it updated. I'll be sending it back out again and updating it on the training center website here in the next few days. Well, later today. Most of the fields, like I said, they're pretty well defined. As we issue this, please take the time, for those of you that are doing these things, to go back through and revisit that. I think the consistency in the data has improved dramatically over the last couple years. And sometimes, though, you do things enough times, you think you remember everything, and you don't necessarily remember it the way it should be. The fields that were added, like I said, we added an actual, a year ago we added the audited MMBTUs. Now we went ahead and added the actual so we can do some comparative analysis. Turner's got a little more meat in the sandwich on that, but that's been part of the reason we've been encouraging everybody to start going to the completion report, because that gives you some of that data. We added this field I was talking about here, the ACH 50 pre and post. That has got some long-term goals for us. We're wanting to be able to do some comparative analysis over time as we accumulate data on the relationship of the ACH to CFM 50 in both the pre and post state, and then eventually we'll start zeroing in and maybe come looking at some of your client files to get even more specific data. But we have some aspirations of making some arguments to DOE by the time we renew our audit the next go around on some thresholds of when we're going to actually undertake air sealing, for example. So the last field we added down here was the energy index. There is the section in the audit tool that will calculate this for you. Ian has worked up a addition to the client workbook that he has sent to me, and I have not went through and proofed it and updated the workbook and send that out. I hope to accomplish that in the next week or so finally as well, so that it will calculate that energy index for you. But these are all just new data points that we're trying to collect so that we can do a little bit better analysis of our effectiveness, along with that addition of that thermostat serial number box there. I've got some stuff on that here in a second, but those are the big changes. There was one minor change down here on the LED installation. It was a measure code thing. It doesn't really impact you all, but it was something RMP wanted. The one field I want to again remind people about is this comments box. There are some of you that use this quite well, I believe, and there's some that I think the opportunity is there to help better explain some of the things that information on the BWR might be leading us at the state reviewing those BWRs to a false conclusion. So when you're looking at your own work before you turn it in, if it's looking like it doesn't make sense to us, give us some notes down here to help explain it. That might save you a phone call or an email later on when we go to review and approve that BWR. The last thing on this is 1 November. Mark your calendars. So we're going to give you the rest of this month. We've been talking about adding these data points for a while. We've been doing things to get you prepared. But starting 1 November, any job turned in after the 1st of next month that does not contain these new fields, we're going to reject it and we're going to send it back to you until you have that data. So that's you've had more than enough notice, and we want to go ahead and start collecting this as soon as possible to help better improve our analysis and make some arguments to DOE that we have to do on a regular basis now about performance of the program. So let's see here. Next on the hit parade. So let's see. There we go. The 3 data points. Yeah, that's all. Like I said, this is for the actual MBTUs from the completion report where it totals it up. Like I said, Matt's been working with a group of you all on this, and you're going to go into more, I think, later on this. We're going to start looking at how maybe some of this data is even being calculated by the audit. The ACH 50, again, should be, I think pretty much everybody's using TechLog, so that's pretty much calculated for you anyway. And then this is from the audit tool. Another thing I want to talk about, you have one of those moments when you go to a national conference and somebody brings something up and you kind of go, oh, and then you go back and you take a look. One of the things that we've been pretty proud of here in Utah in probably the last 3 or 4 years is our ability to braid multiple funding sources into a job. One of the things that was brought up a couple of weeks ago when I was out in Seattle was this revised definition of a DOE weatherized unit. And it's something that kind of another one of those things I've known what it said for years, taken it for granted, and I go back and I start rereading it and I kind of start going, and I thought this is something I probably should share with the group. So that's part of the reason I invited myself today to your all's meeting. Probably this bold section in the middle is what obviously the meat and the sandwich is. When we're doing work, like I said, our auditing standards require you to use a DOE approved energy audit, so we've got that part done, check, and that it has been applied and weatherization work has been completed, check. Where it can get a little dicey is that second sentence in the bold, about as funds allow, the measures are installed and paid for. When we walk this line on braiding funding, the question that has come up with some other states when they've asked us why we've been so successful and some other things, it's that line about the savings to investment ratio of 1 or greater. We need to be a little bit more cautious at how we're reporting completions in relation to this. I went looking quickly this morning for some examples of some BWRs where I've seen some things that we might be getting into a gray area that is a little bit grayer than we want it to be. When we're looking at some of these jobs that are very heavily funded by LIHEAP and there's no DOE money on the table for a measure that has an SIR of 1 or greater, and then we're dumping all the health and safety costs into DOE, that's probably something that under a external evaluation or monitoring might not be viewed favorably upon us. And so when making that decision on how to split out some of this funding, I would encourage those people that are doing that and making those decisions to maybe go back and revisit this definition that's on the screen here and keep that in your mind as you're deciding how you're chopping up that job and paying for things. Getting that right balance, we want to continue to braid. I'd love to see us continue to braid at that high percentage rate that we've done in the last few years. But I would like to make sure that we as a program are doing that in a responsible way and not just braiding for the sake of having a high percentage. We need to be looking at what DOE's portion of the job is. Does DOE have money in a measure that has an SIR of 1 or greater? Because if they don't, and we're asking them to pick up all these extra expenses like health and safety or other things, we're probably not applying this definition properly to how we're approaching our braiding of funding. That being said, anybody want to weigh in on that?
So when I read this, you emailed this to our team a few days ago, and I read through this, and then I went and looked at our BWRs just for like the last year, and we had 500 or 600 units that we turned in as weatherized units, and there was about 45 or 50 of them that did not have any DOE. They didn't have any materials paid for with DOE funds. And so just to look at our BWRs. Now, our BWRs don't account for labor, but if you just looked at that, that one kind of raised a flag for me. I was like, oh, wait a second. There are actually a number of jobs that we didn't pay for anything out of DOE. I do with the client completion report. That would be our really good backup documentation where it would, if somebody had a question about, well, wait a second, none of these jobs had DOE money in them, we could go to those client completion reports and show, because it breaks down and shows the labor, and then it will also draw a clear line between health and safety measures and measures that were paid for with DOE funds. So I think that report will really help us here as well.
That's exactly right, Mr. Trainer. And while the BWR just has some check boxes on who put labor into the job, that's something I'm trying to figure out a better way to get a little bit of feedback from the feds on, but I'm contemplating how to ask that question in a way that doesn't create bigger problems. So I haven't got around to asking that question, but it has.
Brad, one quick thing before I forget to tell you this. That thing you got highlighted there with your MMBTU saved.
Yeah.
Just your gas.
Yeah. That's
You have
just
to do for your cooling and base load.
yeah. So
Just making sure you knew.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit in coordinators meeting. This is actually that same slide. And then there was the follow-up to that to make sure that we had to come up with the conversion of the kilowatts to get it all jive. So, but yeah. But anyway, like I said, there's definitely some gray there that we probably need to clear up, make sure that we're on the right side. I think just my initial feelings about this and guidance would be that be very cautious in splitting labor and material on an individual measure. That would probably be my best guidance. Probably the best way to stay out of that gray area with this is to not be so creative in how you're paying for a job that you're splitting the cost of materials and labor for an individual measure. So if you're intending to put DOE labor on a job for a measure, then you should probably be putting DOE materials for that same measure. For example, we'll take the easy one, attic insulation. Don't charge the materials off to LIHEAP and the labor off to DOE, for example. So that would be the easiest way to stay on the right side of this definition. Any other thoughts or feedback on this? All right, moving on. Another thing I just wanted to update y'all on, I've been getting asked repeatedly about Energy Out West and state of Utah joining that. So I did have another conversation with members of the board in Seattle at the conference I went to, and then a phone call last week with Mimi Burbidge, who's the chairwoman right now of Energy Out West. So I have notified them through their process that we're going to join. They're actually so excited. They want to just go ahead and waive our probationary period, more or less. Instead of me being the active member participating in that, Wade is going to be the state's representative. Since Energy Out West is a far more technical organization, technical based, I felt the right answer was to have Wade, since he's the head of training for us, being the state's representative for that. One of the things that's going to, there's a couple advantages of that, but one of them that's going to give us a lot more involvement in the development of their conference over time. So, you hear it every time we do training about, asking what you're interested in, things like that. I would just reiterate that, again, this is another path for your voice to make its way up through the layers to actually have an impact on things that happen. We had really good participation. I think we sent like 24 or 26 people to Phoenix this year. That was almost fully 1/3 of the program went to Energy Out West in Phoenix this year. They do hold their conferences on a 2-year rotation or 2-year cycle, so we won't see another one until 2020. They're actually meeting, I think, next week up in Boise, and they're trying to settle on where they're going to hold that. And I wouldn't be shocked. They will probably want to hold one here in Utah in the future. And if or when that does come down, we'll probably be looking at the network to help support some of that as well too. But just wanted to give you an update on that. So some of you have heard we've been talking about Nest in this project with the Nest E thermostats. Now that we're into 1 October, be working with Sue to get the money brought over. We're getting some money specifically from the HEAT program for this project. I also have a phone call later this week with their data guy. I think that's his official title. And we're going to work to develop an analysis program where we're mining the data from those devices to be able to take a look at the effectiveness of our measures and our work. So best guess, and that's all it is best guess, is maybe sometime by the end of the year, 1st of January, we'll actually have those things in hand and start deploying those and installing them. So at least that's my hope. And then the last thing I want to talk about, I sent an email out to a bunch of people. The president did sign what they referred to as the minibus or the funding bill that went through the other day. As you can see, none of you really care about CSBG, I'm sure, but both weatherization and LIHEAP saw a nice increase. That 257 million is not an accurate number. In my conversations, I met with Erica Byrne, who's the director of weatherization for DOE. I met with her for about 2 hours when we were out in Seattle on a wide range of topics. One of the things that she did let me know is they're actually still just finishing up closing out a few grants from our prior cycle. That 257 is going to go up. She wasn't willing to share with me how much, but there was a significant amount of money that was returned to DOE from other states that was rollover from the prior grants. They are waiting for OMB to give that money back to them, but they intend to have a nice chunk of money back and add that into that 257 million. Once the final numbers are out for both, LIHEAP and DOE, I'll let everybody know where we're standing. But this is the first time in a very long time we've been sitting here at the 1st of October and we actually already know what our funding for next year is. So, if you take a look at that far right column, that increase in money, and go back to Mr. Turner's earlier slides on production, we said this before, but you need to start taking steps again today. You're going to be asked next year to do more units than you're doing this year. So, if you're a strategic thinker, you'll be looking down at how to meet those demands. But there will be, I was having this conversation with Ian last week, when you start getting around that 255, 257 range, there is a change in the formula on how DOE allocates money to the states, and it's called the warm climate factor, and that will kick in on this allocation. By the time they add that extra money back in as well, it's pretty clear. I honestly can't tell you what kind of an impact that's going to have to us. I think we'll probably not notice it. It really tends to impact the really colder climate states and the warm states. And since we're kind of right there in the middle, I don't think we're going to see too significant of an impact when they apply the warm factor or the warm state factor. So I think we'll be okay. But like I said, in either case, we will see an increase in both funding streams for our program year 19 funding. And again, this is money that's in the bank. It was approved. It was signed off by Congress. So This isn't projected. This isn't anticipated. These are real dollars. So just keep that in mind. And I think, yeah, that's all I had for the guys. So a few other slides in there before I turn the steering wheel back over to Mr. Turner to let him finish up and bring this thing home. Is there anything anybody has for me? Wow. Okay. Well, all right. Mr. Turner, let me hand the keys back to you.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Have a good rest of the week.
Okay, I had, just in the last 12 minutes here, I've got a couple of slides where I wanted to drill down a little bit on the stuff that Brad went through. Quite, he kind of went through them quickly. The MMBTUs saved. Brad had a good slide. Here's just another one that shows. I hope the auditors understand this, but when you're filling in the field for the audited MMBTUs, that number comes from your recommended measures report. It's this last column, and it is the sum of all those numbers. So that's how you get that number. Now, I had hoped to have a picture over here of how to do the actual, and I got to a point where I have questions, and Ian actually alluded to it just a moment ago. So I've got some learning to do before I know exactly how to have you guys do the actual. So we'll cover that at a later date as we learn how to do that. But we'll definitely have it ready before the 1st of November, so you guys will know how to report on it. The next box was just the ACH 50. So this is air changes per hour, and the 50 is that we're depressurizing or pressurizing the house to 50. So we're running our blower door at 50, and then we're calculating our air changes per hour. Brad shared a screenshot from the Tech Auto Test reports. That's on Android. It's on Apple. So on all your mobile devices, you can run this. I think most of the auditors are already using this test. One thing I wanted to make sure you guys are aware of, so when you do your blower door test, it will tell you what your measured air changes per hour at 50 are, as long as you fill in the building volume. And the nice thing is you can go into the house, you can run your blower door and do your audit, and then you can go back to the office and sit down and figure out the building volume. And then if you'll just open the app back up, put the building volume in, and then rerun the test, it'll tell you what your ACH is. For anybody who wants to know, this is the formula to do it. It's kind of a simple formula, but the report does it. Please use the report. If anybody has a specific reason why they don't want to use the report, if it helps with your business processes to do something different, I'm open to that. But I would, if wherever you can, please use the report, because that's the best place for all of us to know where to go and see it. If anybody needs help with, if you have other methods that you want to do and you need help with this calculation, here's a screenshot of the calculation, the equation, sorry. And then here's an example. So if you want to, you can jump back into this video later and go through that. So that's air changes, and what we're doing, air changes before, so you're doing your pre-blower door and then your post-blower door. So you just run how many air changes you have before weatherization and how many air changes you have after. And this one becomes a very valuable piece of information as we look to shift away from just the 30 or 50% reduction that is currently our goal. Now, along those lines, as we are talking about air changes per hour, I've actually had 3 or 4 auditors have reached out to me with scenarios about homes that they've audited that are really, really tight. And they basically said, what do I do when I come across a home that's really tight? Is it okay for us to not do air sealing? And we've been moving in this direction for a little while, and sometimes we have been using the 30% and the 50% metrics for a very long time, and it's going to take a little while to move away from them if that is in fact what we do. So we've been taking steps to do that, but we're still a ways away. So to the question, and here was one question I got recently. A house is 4.2 air changes per hour on the audit. Do we have to do any air sealing? The answer is yes. You do have to do air sealing. And right now our guidelines say that your agency should make every effort to achieve a reduction of at least 30% on the blower door. And this is in section B94DV. This one is specifically talking about homes where the pre-weatherization blower door is below 4,000 CFM. If it's above 4,000 CFM, then you have to get a 50% reduction. So remember that. But this is what we told DOE we're doing. And so if you get to a home that's super tight, you still need to be working towards that 30 or 50% reduction. The guidelines also say this. It says if a reduction cannot be achieved, a reasonable explanation must be included in the audit or on the QCI. Now, the question would be, what is a reasonable explanation? And it seems like we could just go, well, hey, this thing's really tight, so therefore we don't need to do anything. But right now, that is not going to be a reasonable explanation. In fact, the main reason that we put this into the guidelines is really just to give ourselves a little bit of wiggle room if we ever get into a weird situation. But this number 4 here is not going to become the rule. We are not ready yet to say anytime it's tighter than this, then that is a sufficient reason. We're working toward that because, if we do change to an air changes per hour as our target, then we will get permission from DOE to say, any home we come to that is below this line, we want DOE's permission to not do air sealing, but we don't have it yet. So stay the course. We're still doing 30 and 50% reductions. I had a couple of examples on that. And this was the thing I wanted to point out. On one of the examples, they had documented that their reason for not air sealing this home was that it currently meets the IECC 2015 standard of 4 air changes per hour, and they said air sealing is not cost effective. Basically, my main point here is that this is not going to be an allowable reason for not air sealing the house. If you were to be able to show us through zonals and to show us that you had identified the leak, but there was no way to fix the leak, that would be a legitimate reason. I was in a home last week where we did some advanced leakage quantification, and we were able to determine that most of the leakage was coming through the wood floor, and it was over a crawl space where there was only 12 inches of room. And so that was a legitimate reason for not being able to seal that home up to the target. But if we go into a home and it's just super tight, I want to know, where were the opportunities and why could we not address those opportunities? But yeah, we're seeing a handful of houses out there that they are kind of tight. Like this one was, it was a large home, 4,200 square feet. The pre-blower door, or the pre-air changes per hour, was 3.89. But the audit's still giving them a budget of $425, and there are still some opportunities to reduce the leakage there. And then this other one was a smaller home, only 1,100 square feet. Their blower door was 667, so it's like, wow, that's kind of a tight home. Their pre-ACH 50 was 4.49, and it gives them $70. But that $70, we're looking for a 30% reduction on that. So we're just looking for 200 CFM, give or take. And in a lot of cases, there are some good opportunities to seal those up. So, and then the other thing to be aware of, this The current ICC standard is actually 3 air changes per hour for our climate zones. So even on these homes that look like they're kind of tight, we are not yet meeting the current standard. Now the state of Utah has not adopted that, but anyway, we just want to be very careful about how we're stating this. But with it all, just remember that for right now, we're doing a 30 and 50% reduction, and then we're just beginning to report what you guys are finding out there. We want to know how tight the homes are before you touch them and how tight they are after you touch them. And then, as Brad mentioned earlier, we're going to take that data and we're going to use it. We may come to your agencies and go through some of the files where you had some really tight homes, so we can gather the data we need to make a good case to DOE to allow us to, in the future, to not air seal some of these homes that are really tight. So the last thing was this, the energy index. And just really quickly, I wanted to show you guys how to calculate the energy index. So this is in the energy audit. In order to get to it, you have to click on the client tab, and it's the third tab over called energy index. So once you've created the client, then you're going to click onto this tab and you're going to fill it out, and it will generate this total heating. It's BTUs over, I don't remember, heating degree days over square feet, and it just gives us an indication of how much energy that client is actually using, and not necessarily, how tight just the home is itself, but this starts to give us a little insight in how the family's using the house and how energy efficient they are. In order to get this to generate a number, you do have to fill out all of the fields here. So just in the next 2 or 3 minutes, I'm going to go through this, and then we'll end the meeting. So if you've got to go, if you watch it later or hang on with us for a minute. But so the first field is your fuel costs, and you have got to select the fuel cost library that is going to be associated with this job. So right now you're selecting the appropriate setup library, and so once you've done that, if you get into this tab, it will show you all of the fuel cost libraries, and just like you do on the other section of the audit, you've got to select the right fuel cost library because it's going to calculate the fuel cost based off of that. You're going to put in your floor area just in your square feet, and this is the square footage of conditioned space. And then you have to put in your heating degree days, and it's at a base of 65 Fahrenheit. And this is just heating degree days. We're not talking about cooling degree days as well. Now, the biggest question here was, where do we get this information? I know Ian had found a specific spot that he was getting it, and I wanted to show you guys, this is where I would like everybody to get the heating degree day information. So if you go to the IWTC website, on our resources tab, under section 7, which is where I put all the audit stuff, the very last thing is the heating degree days calculator. If you will click on that link, it's going to take you to Energy Star's website, and they have a heating degree days calculator. And if you'll click on that calculator, I like this calculator because if you'll just fill in these fields, it will give you exactly what you're supposed to put into the audit tool. So you're going to select your country, your state, and then the zip code of the house, and that's going to pick the closest weather station. And then this year ending field, so what you're doing with your heating degree days is you're actually picking the heating degree days which represent the period of time that you're taking the utility information from. So if the utility information came from April of 2017 to March of 2018, then you would select the year ending 2018, and you would select March 31st. So this is going to take the 12 months before this date, and it's going to give you the heating degree days. So just really quickly, I'll show you an example. We're just going to pick Utah, and I'm going to pick my zip code. And if you put in the year ending, you hit calculate, it's just going to give you this number. We're after annual heating degree days. So 4829, that's the number you put in. So I go back to my audit tool. I put in the 4829, and then you're going to put in whatever the heating fuel is. If you have one heat source for the house, you just put in the primary heating fuel. If the house has two heating sources that they are regularly using, you need to put in both of them. But you're going to put in the heating fuel. You're going to put in the total cost. What was their total bill for the 12-month period that you're looking at for natural gas? So add up all 12 of their bills and put that number in. And then what it's going to do is the audit will automatically assume that 70% of that total bill goes towards their heating. Leave that alone unless you have a bunch of data to back up why it should be a higher or lower number. But in general, you're going to leave that at a default of 70% and run the energy index. So, but that's it. If you'll select the fuel, if you'll put in the cost, and then, so let me just delete the cost out and show you. So, you know, just once you figure it up, so say the total cost of $524 for the whole 12-month period, and then it's going to estimate that 70% of that went to the heating, and it calculates, again, the BTUs used over the heating degree days over the square feet gives us this ratio. And you're just going to enter that number, the 6.1 will go into the BWR. This 6.1 will also show up at the top of your client completion report. So if you're looking for a place to, you don't need to write that anywhere else. You know, you can put your client completion report in the file, and it will have that energy index included. So that was kind of a lot of stuff very quickly, but we recorded this, so if you need to go back and look at any of this stuff, hopefully this video can kind of be a resource for any of these things we talked about today. Does anybody have any questions on any of the stuff I've been addressing before we end? I think we covered everything. All right, well, thank you guys so much for your participation. And again, thank you for all that you're doing. Please go forward and implement these things, and just thanks for making the program awesome.